This story begins with my daughter, who's 17, encouraging me to share this experience. Now, as the dad who tends to follow the advice of the women in my life, I found myself in a somewhat awkward situation at a restaurant tonight, with a group of people who were, to put it lightly, a bit snobbish. Let me introduce the characters involved. First, there's my wife, who's the reason I was dragged into this dinner in the first place. Then we have my wife's coworker number 1, CW1, and her husband, who I'll refer to as Arrogant Engineer 1, AE1. Next up is my wife's coworker number 2, CW2, and her husband, who happens to be my CPA, Certified Public Accountant. Lastly, there's Arrogant Engineer 2, AE2, and his wife. Each couple brought their 2 teenage children, making for quite a large group. We ended up at a Japanese steakhouse in America, the kind where the chefs cook the food right in front of you, putting on a bit of a show. The reason for this gathering? It was CW1 and AE1's youngest daughter's birthday, and since she's close friends with our daughter, they invited us all to join them for the celebration. The parents were seated at one table, and the teenagers at another. At the teen table, my daughters, who are 17 and 14, ordered sushi appetizers, mocktails, and a dish of shrimp with scallops. Meanwhile, at the adult table, the sake was flowing, and a few top-shelf drinks were being enjoyed. My wife and I ordered our appetizers, drinks, and dinners without much fuss. Now, here's where things start to get interesting. It became apparent that AE1 and AE2 were in some sort of silent competition to see who could spend the most on their meals. My CPA and I found this amusing and decided to stay out of the game, exchanging knowing chuckles as we observed from the sidelines. But then, things took a turn. AE2 overheard my daughter placing her order and decided to make a snide remark.
Careful now. Your daddy is only an agricultural engineer. He doesn't make as much as us, real engineers.
For some context, AE1 and AE2 are both structural engineers with bachelor's degrees, while I'm an agricultural engineer with a PhD. I work for governments, private investors, and several large agro corporations. I also own my own consulting firm, where I focus on designing sustainable, reusable gardens. This work has allowed me to travel to poorer countries and help communities use their resources to start growing their own food. However, it seemed that AE1 and AE2 had a very narrow and misguided view of my work. They apparently believed that all I did was travel to impoverished places and teach people how to dig in the dirt, assuming I did all this work for free and therefore made very little money. Now, I'm not rich by any means, but I'm comfortable. We don't indulge in extravagance, which has allowed us to save quite a bit, and my wife also works, adding to our financial stability. However, in 2023, I was fortunate enough to be awarded a rather lucrative contract to design tower gardens in several states. This contract is worth 7 figures spread over 3 years. Back to the dinner. As the meal progressed, AE1 and AE2 started asking me the most ridiculous questions like,
Is it good to grow onions and carrots in the same garden?
They were clearly trying to mock me and my work, laughing as they did so. Their wives eventually told them to stop, but the damage was done. I chalked it up to drunken arrogance and didn't even bother responding to their jabs. My CPA, however, found the situation absolutely hilarious. He was laughing so hard that he nearly fell out of his chair. As it turns out, he's also AE1's CPA, so he knows the ins and outs of both our finances. AE1, in his arrogance, taunted the CPA to reveal what he had brought home last year after bonuses. My CPA, ever the professional, pulled up the figures on his phone and shared the information with the table. It turns out AE1's income was about 1/3 of what I had earned in 2023. The CPA then looked at me and asked if I wanted him to share my figures as well. I declined, and he nodded in understanding. But the taunts didn't stop there. AE1 and AE2 continued to egg me on, clearly trying to get a rise out of me. At that point, I decided it was time for a little bit of petty revenge. I excused myself and went to the restroom. On the way, I found our waiter and quietly paid for the entire check, leaving a generous tip on top of what had already been added for our large party. After I returned to the table, the waiter came out to thank me in front of everyone for the tip and wished us all a good night. AE1 and AE2 stared at me, clearly shocked and unsure of how to react. I smiled, nodded, and then turned to my CPA calmly. "Go ahead, tell them what I made last year." The look on their faces was priceless as my CPA revealed my income. After that, I simply said good night and left the restaurant with my family, laughing and enjoying our evening.